I welcome now Harley Aussoleil with Complainers and Killjoys.
Thank you, Iliana. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Hi. Hello. My name's Harley. I am 1/3 of a collective. I love that door sound. I didn't mean that sarcastically. So I'm 1/3 of a collective. The other two couldn't be here today, so I'm going to try and be as engaging as if we were all together. We are 3 friends who met through memeing, and we're also 3 people who make artwork from between Berlin and Kassel, and we are working in the art scene, and we're also working to navigate it despite how problematic the art scene can be. This is our member Jem A, also known as Freeze Magazine, and so he's done a lot of work with making. Bringing memes into the art space, into the white cube. So this is a meme format that some of you may know, with Wojak being sad at a party, and bringing this into a literal white cube space. This was on Weserstraße in Berlin a couple of years ago. And he worked last year at the Documenta doing as a meme harvester and doing a lot of guerrilla meme pasting throughout the space. Here is his piece in the hallway. And so they met us, Jem met Fran and I, because we work in a queer feminist collective called Coven Berlin. And we do a lot of different things with workshops and organizing exhibitions. We also have an online magazine that does work through submissions, if any of you are interested in submitting. And in 2019, we really started to bring our love for memes into our work by curating 10 queer feminist meme makers that we really love. And the work was like this really big, long scrolls that would descend from the ceiling. That was quite hard to photograph. And we also made our own memes, and we made them on, one of them was a scroll that you could really pull and kind of infinitely scroll through to mimic the internet. And then we started doing a lot of meme workshops around right extremism and the way right extremist groups proliferate through memes and how to recognize them, and as well as making memes that we found personally liberating to sort of explore this potential of memes, their visible potential to be both like liberatory, queer, feminist, and pro-democracy, and but as well a very powerful tool that's being used for bigotry and men's rights activism and different kinds of neo-Nazi groups across the world. So it's an interesting potential that it has. We were working a lot with these meme workshops, thinking about memes as collages. So we would make collage memes together. And during Corona, when the pandemic regulations were really tight, we did meme workshops online. We invited people to talk about memes, and we streamed that through Twitch, which is usually for gamers, so that people could come and listen and interact, comment, and now it's all on our magazine for people to watch as videos. Which brings us to what is a meme. Some of you might be really versed in what a meme is. Some might not. I would say a meme is any sort of like satirical image, text, but not necessarily based work. This I picked because it's a very early example of what I think a meme is. That looks a lot like a contemporary meme to me. And it also attests to the dysphoria one has in front of a camera that's been true since the creation of cameras. But memes today look a little bit more like the early 2000s, or they've evolved quite a bit from like advice animals, like you see up here, which became a really popular template to use different animals and have some sort of declarative thing, like I can has hamburger in the early 2000s, to today being more freeform, more about taking selfies, adding text, or using found imagery, like from the news, or from stock images. Yeah, this is a scary one. And I'm borrowing this taxonomy of memes from the doctor, like the meme doctor, like a friend of mine who I think is a wonderful meme researcher, Adil Gallup. And she broke down this into a taxonomy of different kinds of memes according to content. This is something that we might know a lot, or that gets posted a lot on Facebook, is the more like a common denominator joke, ones that are pretty apolitical and inoffensive and very relatable and like very visible online, to things that are increasingly less relatable, like a confessional meme. And this is great. I think it's very relatable. To more niche kinds of memes that aren't meant to be necessarily relatable, only to the people in that subgroup. Sometimes they're making fun of themselves, but I think the point of these memes is it's something that people in that group understand, and it doesn't need to be legible. And then memes as a form of critique, and this is more where my talk is about, and it's also kind of the point of this collective Her and Why that I'm a part of, because we believe that memes have a power to be a really sharp form of critique, because they can communicate really complex ideas very quickly and easily, and they're accessible. And this is the last category. This is more the grotesque, ironic sort of meme. Nick Douglas, the researcher, calls this internet ugly. So this is using very purposefully ugly images and like low quality images to communicate a certain kind of irony or disillusionment or anger or pessimism. We do see this a lot in like right-wing memeing, to cover up bigotry, to make bigotry more palatable, that it's, you know, cloaked in irony. It's meant to be lighthearted, so it's harder to hold those people to account. But it's also something that can be used in this way to talk about sexism. So it does have an interesting sort of two-edged, like double-edged quality to it. And I think that irony in memes plays a lot on identity politics, which goes into what are identity politics. I think this is especially important to talk about when it comes to visibility, because we hear identity politics a lot, especially now that it's Pride Month. So identity politics, of course, the idea of intersecting identities and overlapping oppressions is something that has been talked about well before 1977, but it was coined in the English language by the Combahee River Collective in their manifesto. And so this was a collective formed by two women in Boston who grew really disillusioned with different national organizations that were addressing race and gender. Firstly, the National Organization of Women Now, which failed to really address the needs of Black women, and then the National Black Feminist Organization to address the needs of queer and lesbian Black women. And because the group was very conservative in its politics, refused to have more radical politics. It was a capitalist group, privileging the more elite in that group. And so two women named Barbara Smith and Demita Frazier formed the first Combahee River Collective, and they, from 1977 to 1980, held, I think, 7 retreats, and Audre Lorde was on one of these retreats. And so they really came up with this idea of standpoint epistemology, which means epistemology as like the study of knowledge, so privileging knowledge that comes from your standpoint, that comes from your lived experience, and that informing identity politics. And identity politics, as it was conceived in 1977, I think is really interesting and radical to look back at this history, because it was really thought of as an entry point into mainstream politics. So back then, identity politics was not thought of as necessarily separatist, but rather an entry point into meaningful political engagement for people who were marginalized by broader nationalist groups. Rather than withdrawing politically. So, you know, a lot we see, like with Flinta groups, this is a separatist group and not necessarily a bad or a good thing, But I think this is an interesting way that identity politics have shifted through the years and the way we organize politically to be sometimes more separatist. But also there is, I think, an elite sort of atomizing of our identity and a co-optation of identity politics. That is interestingly very different from the coalition organizing that the Combahee River Collective was doing back then. A lot of what they were doing was bringing visibility to forced sterilization of Black and Puerto Rican women in Boston. And so there was a lot of broad, like, racial coalitions and class coalitions of women coming together to organize in the streets to bring visibility to these issues and also to domestic violence issues, like this particular poster is talking about. So this brings me to identity politics today. I had to do this because it's June, and the way that maybe our identities are atomized by elite institutions, by the government, by the military, to pinkwash a lot of Western countries into appearing democratic because they are supposedly for queer rights. So taking something that had a lot of radical potential and co-opting it. And this is how I see a lot of identity politics showing up today in forms of representation through corporations, through ads to join the police. Of course, there are good ways that identity politics have morphed today, but I think this is a very interesting element to identity politics and visibility right now. And of course, we see this in the art world as well, like the complicated ways that identity politics are co-opted or are not like radically dealt with, like with the Julia Stoschek collection. This is one of the biggest digital art collections in the world, and she has an incredible array of artists. Like, it's a very diverse range of artists. However, Julia Stoschek will not be held accountable for the fortune that her family comes from, which is from like Nazi forced labor and making jerry cans for the German army. This is just an interesting way that identity politics is neither purely good, nor like it's complex. This, maybe some of you might know, is from a show that was held from June to October 2021 in Berlin, in the Kunsthalle Berlin. And this was curated by Walter Smerling, and it was it was a curation of many different European artists, but funded by Russia, France, Germany, to celebrate the diversity of Europe. But Walter Smerling is also someone who like funds his work through Rheinmetall, which is a German arms producer. There's a lot of like dirty money and governmental national interests that came together to make this show. Reportedly, some artists weren't even paid, and it led to a lot of people leaving the show and boycotting the show. This is an interesting thing of like diversity and optics, and it not really being practiced in materiality and in material ways in the art world. And this brings me to a theoretical framework that we're using in our collective. These are just two books and two thinkers that I find really inspiring. Olufemi Taiwo wrote this just last year. It's very new, and it's basically, the central thesis is that identity politics is not the problem, and it's not something that is a inherently capitalist concept. In fact, it has very radical roots, and that the problem is really the elite capture of identity politics and the co-optation of identity politics, and that we can counter this through coalition movements. And Sarah Ahmed, who uses complaining as a feminist pedagogy. I think that's really interesting, to look at the people who complain against power, to learn about the abuse of power itself, and how complaining against abuses of power often gets over-bureaucratized so that it never goes anywhere. And she's mostly talking about it in the university, like sexual harassment in the university, and how this just gets put into a dark room. A lot of like diversity beauftragte have to deal with it, who are underpaid and have very little resources, and it doesn't really get the light of day. So both of these authors are looking at abuses of power and elite capture, and the solution being basically solidarity and coalition politics and collective movements, which I thought were like very inspiring because I do think that meme making has the power to effectively, I don't know, bring against powerful institutions quite sharp criticism that gets seen very easily and can also unite people together. So this is from workshops that we've been doing. These are just 2 memes that people in the workshops made. And I think also a fun thing about memes is that you don't see the caption here, but if this were posted on Instagram, you could also link the Queen Elizabeth meme to an article about colonial looting in the former British Commonwealth, you know? So it is an interesting way through which people can find and be, can access knowledge in a very accessible way. Most people have the internet. You don't need to go to art school to make a meme. There are like pretty low financial barriers. So this is sort of like the power of memes for me, and illustrating very complex truths, like being an artist and depending on institutions, even while you resist them, even while you realize that you resist the ways they abuse that power, but how much you need them to make a living or to have an art career. And these are just some examples of how I think memes have played a really powerful role critiquing the art world, especially in Germany. This is from the Künstlerhaus Britannien in Berlin in 2019. Some of you might know this. This is it was a show on Afrofuturism where there were no black artists invited, and no black European artists, no black Latin American artists, etc. And so Soup du Jour did this great meme with Sun Ra and Elon Musk. This is from a Sun Ra song, Whitey on the Moon. And you know, like with this kind of, it gets circulated really fast, and if I click on it, I can learn more about what happened. And you know, I don't need to wait for my complaint to go to the to Britannien and for it to be legitimized, etc. The white pube is also really great. This is a meme they did about basically like governmental restrictions on Corona going down and how institutions just became inaccessible once again after proving that it wasn't so hard to be accessible when they had to be. And this is a funny, it's not that funny, I guess, but this is an example from the Serpentine Pavilion, from the Serpentine Gallery in London. They have for the last, since 2000, every summer they will ask a leading architect to design a pavilion outside. And it's a very diverse and like interesting list of architects from around the world. And this one was most recently by Lina Gottme. She's a French-Lebanese architect, and the piece is called À table, which is like an invitation to the table, to collectivity. But this piece is a pseudo-private space. So it's not really a public space meant for people to form collectively. There are security guards. It closes at a certain time. It follows a capitalist logic. You know, you go in there to buy snacks that they sell you there. And yeah, and like I said, at the end of the summer, it gets sold, and it's not really clear to whom it gets sold. And this was a meme in response to those kinds of practices. I mean, we know that the Serpentine Gallery received a lot of Sackler money and other private donors that we don't know about, but we can only imagine, big oil as well. And this is another meme that Jem made about the invisible labor in the art world and the ways that bigotry is covered up in the art world. And I love this. I love Brokeback Mountain. And this is another meme artist that we really like, that we like to show. She's working in Berlin. And this is she memes a lot about her experience as an artist in Berlin. And transphobia and passport privilege, I think, are really great. She does a lot of very funny videos and reels, and she also works as a professional chef. She wears many hats. But I think, yeah, these have been especially great. They're just, for me, a really good counter to Berlin Ausländer memes, which are sometimes, yeah, an interesting thing because there's not a lot of, it's made by an Austrian memer. So I think here identity politics plays a very different role. This is another memer we love. I love Lil Perp because she will take terms that have been like terms to like maybe she reappropriates a lot of stuff like girl boss to talk about anti-capitalism, and I think these are great like pride memes. And lastly, Jin Kazama, who was also a part of our show in 2019, who does a lot of great work on just Islamophobia, gender, meta, internet gazing, just like examples of memes that I do think that are not necessarily critiquing the art world per se, but are just a great example of resistant identity politics, like being made visible in a meme or being visualized in a meme. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Harley. Are there any questions for Harley? No.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, do you have boundaries, what you really don't want to have as a joke, or like where is the, because that's sometimes like, what is a joke and what is what not?
That's a good question. I think that's, yeah. I mean, with memes, like I think it's really hard. It's really hard to draw a line about this. And I don't know if I'm in favor of making like a fixed rule. I think it also depends so much on who is making the meme. Of course, sometimes you don't know who is making the meme. But context plays such a big role. For example, I'm from New York, and this is something that is found very distasteful in Europe, but we really like 9/11 joke memes because I think implicitly it's about American imperialism, and it's about how America created an excuse to invade Iraq. So it's so we do joke about that a lot, and I find that it's something I love doing with other people from New York, because it's also something we like went through and lived. It's also celebrating a tragedy. So I think in memeing there is this tension that is held, where there is there's a constant tension being held, and I don't know if it's. It's quite complicated, because I don't have the best answer for you. But I guess in that way it's also hard sometimes to tell what a meme's intention is as well. And I think that's also a part of memes as artworks, and that there's not a perfect rule there. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. There was a whole issue in Kunstforum dedicated to memes. This means that the memes have become quite powerful in the art world. And what can you say about?
So just talking about memes in the art world. Yes, it has become very popular. I mean, that's also, I think, why we've been able to make shows about memes. It's become very capitalized upon in the art scene. It's also like very complicated what happens when work that is really accessible and I think quite democratic in how it can be made becomes like monetized. I mean, we see this with like NFTs. Now that NFTs aren't really kind of have lost their popularity. But yeah, I don't know. I welcome it. I think it's interesting. I think sometimes like making a painting of a meme is interesting as a classic medium interpretation of this digital format. But I think I'm really interested in how the digital logic shares a similar logic to visual media that is on paper. So like, bringing a meme into a space, like what Gem did, or bringing a meme off the internet. So I think there's a lot of interesting ways people are playing with it. Yeah.
Is the group Coven using lots of memes?
Yes. We have a monthly newsletter where we curate a meme dump every month. If you're interested, it's on Instagram.
Let's check it out.
I guess.
Are there any other questions, Valerie?
I was wondering if you had or it happens once in the workshops of memes that someone was co-opting, for example, the identity politics, and how do you deal with that, for example, like kind of also relating to this question of the boundaries, but if exactly in the moment of the workshop or something, if you have some situation and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, we I'm just bringing this up as an example. We do have a whole talk about identity politics so that everyone is on the same page, regardless of whatever education background they have, that we have a shared vocabulary in the space, and we emphasize memeing from your experience and not from an imagined other. And that also, I think these are always the funniest and the most interesting works anyway, aside from being appropriative when you do it from some other perspective. And so we do talk about this. It hasn't happened before that someone was appropriative or inappropriate in this way, or characterized someone marginalized. This hasn't happened before. But what we have done is to imagine different kind of positionalities in relation to art world crises, just to complicate how memeing can work. We haven't done anything with Battanian, but we did use Humboldt Forum as an example. I mean, as you probably know, the Humboldt Forum is a really contested art space for holding these stolen bronzes from present-day Nigeria and how they refuse to restitute them, etc., or they do in these very symbolic and strange ways. So we usually do a round of memeing about this particular conflict in the art world or this crisis. And then we say, okay, well, imagine now that you are on a worker's visa and you're working for the Humboldt Forum. How would you criticize the institution then? So there is playing with positionality, and I don't think it's done in a characterized way, but to think about how do I criticize an institution that I'm also beholden to, that I also need. So in this way, we do play with positionality a little, but it's not a free-for-all because I think that could also get weird. Yeah, I think, this is sort of how we do it. We also talk about this concept of punching up, not down, this idea of mocking those who hold more power than you rather than ones who are more marginalized than you. So.
I want to know, how do you get your topics, from which media?
I do get a lot of my topics from memes. That is how I find out a lot about different scandals. There was a gallerist who was accused of sexual assault in Berlin very recently, and I found out about this through memes, through Zoe Claire Miller, who was a part of the BBK in Berlin. So this kind of stuff. Other than that, I also listen to Democracy Now! Every day, but this is a New York news source, so it is a bit America-centric. Yeah, that's personally how I get my information. But mostly through my friends sending me things. I think that's also a way a lot of people get information, where you meme each other about this or that, or you send each other links. I often am getting my news through texting something rather than like opening a newspaper or watching a TV program. Well. Yes. Thanks, Ileana.
I wanted to ask, what kind of platforms do you use, and do you think about the platform before you create your meme, or how does it relate to each other?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I think people looking into platforms that are not corporatively owned is something really exciting right now. I'm still mostly on Instagram, honestly. I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to support Meta, but I am effectively supporting Meta. So it is another tension, I think, where. Yeah, I guess that's where most people are. So it's very visible, even though you're on a corporate platform. So it's imperfect. But I'm also really curious if people know, or I'm always curious to learn about alternative platforms. Like, what is this alternative to Instagram, to Twitter? It's like Blue. Does someone know? No? Well, see, exactly. That's also the point. Like, it's hard to... Yeah, but yes, I mean, of course, I'm for non-corporate internet platforms, but I think this is a contradiction that we are sort of in as well. I swear there's something with blue something.
It's just, I just
Mastodon.
said the name, it's called Mastodon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. And now there will be a bigger break, and we have also an evening program that will start at 8, and Sven will introduce it. So let's see. Thank you.